You already know their names. You already know their names, even if you don't realize it. The man who published his first novel at 49. The woman who earned her medical degree at 52. The entrepreneur who launched the company that changed an entire industry at 54, after 2 failed businesses and a bankruptcy filing. You know these people. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've told yourself their story is the exception. A fluke. A feel-good outlier that doesn't apply to you. But what if it does? What if the people who succeed late in life aren't the lucky ones who finally caught a break? What if they are, in a very measurable and scientific sense, built differently, not by accident, but by the very path they took? Here's what the data actually says. In 2019, researchers at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management published a study that quietly rewrote everything we thought we knew about peak performance. Professor Dashun Wang and his team analyzed over 1.1 million scientific papers, tracking when researchers produced their most cited, most impactful work. The popular belief, driven by decades of mythology, was that genius peaks young, that the great discoveries come before 30, that after that, you're just maintaining. The data told a completely different story. Across every field studied, physics, chemistry, economics, biology, the average age of peak creative output was not 25, it was not even 35. The researchers found that the most impactful work could emerge at virtually any point in a career. And more importantly, they found something hiding inside the data that almost nobody talks about. The late peaking scientists had something the early peakers didn't: a broader base of cross-domain experience. They had failed more. They had wandered more. They had worked in fields that looked unrelated to their eventual breakthrough, and that apparent detour turned out to be the engine of their most important discovery. Your brain doesn't see this as a detour. Your brain is building something. Neuroscience has a term for what happens when you accumulate years of seemingly unrelated experience. It's called cognitive reserve, and the research on it, led in part by Dr. Yaakov Stern at Columbia University, shows that people with high cognitive reserve, built through exposure to diverse ideas, challenges, and environments, are more resilient thinkers. Their brains literally have more neural pathways connecting disparate concepts. When they encounter a new problem, they have more cognitive tools to reach for. The person who spent 10 years in sales before becoming a novelist doesn't just write a novel. They write a novel that understands how people are persuaded. The person who failed at a startup before launching a second one doesn't just try again. They build with a structural understanding of where things collapse. Their experience is not wasted, it is compressed into capability. This is why your path doesn't disqualify you. It is the preparation. But there's another layer to this, and it requires understanding something strange about how the human brain matures. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, emotional regulation, and strategic thinking, does not fully develop until your mid to late 20s. And recent neuroimaging research suggests that for some individuals, the refinement of those circuits continues well into the 30s and even 40s. What this means is that the same person who struggled to focus, struggled to delay gratification, struggled to stay with a difficult problem at 22, that same person, a decade later, may be operating with a neurological architecture that simply wasn't available to them before. You didn't fail early because you weren't capable. You may have been running on hardware that wasn't finished yet. Now layer on top of that the concept of crystallized intelligence. Psychologist Raymond Cattell drew a distinction between 2 types of intelligence that every human possesses. The first is fluid intelligence, the raw processing speed, the ability to solve novel problems quickly, the mental agility you associate with young people who seem to pick things up instantly. This peaks in early adulthood and then gradually declines. The second is crystallized intelligence, and this is where the story gets interesting. Crystallized intelligence is everything you know. Every pattern you've recognized, every mistake you've diagnosed, every relationship that taught you how people actually work, every project that fell apart and revealed the invisible variable you hadn't accounted for. Crystallized intelligence doesn't peak at 25. It doesn't peak at 35. Research published in the journal Psychological Science found that some markers of crystallized intelligence, including vocabulary, accumulated knowledge, and the ability to perceive social dynamics, continue improving well into your 60s and 70s. The person who succeeds at 50 isn't overcoming age. They are using age. But understanding this intellectually is not the same as believing it. And here is where the real obstacle lives. Not in your brain's biology, but in the story you've been told so many times that it now feels like your own voice. The story says there is a window, that the window opens in your 20s, peaks in your 30s, and that if you haven't arrived by your early 40s, the window is closing. This story is not supported by data. It is supported by culture. Specifically, by a culture that has historically confused the visibility of youth with the productivity of youth. Young founders, young athletes, young artists get celebrated loudly. The 54-year-old who quietly builds something extraordinary doesn't trend. That asymmetry in attention has been mistaken for an asymmetry in potential. Dr. Angela Duckworth's research on grit, the combination of passion and perseverance, revealed something that directly applies here. The people who achieve at the highest levels over long time horizons are not the ones who were most naturally talented at the start. They are the ones who kept returning, who treated failure as information rather than verdict, who accumulated the willingness to try again as a skill in its own right. Grit compounds, and it compounds differently than talent. Here is what is actually happening in the life of someone who breaks through late. They are not starting from zero. They are arriving at the starting line of their highest potential endeavor, already carrying decades of invisible preparation, their technical knowledge, their emotional regulation, their ability to tolerate discomfort, their clarity about what they actually want, which is perhaps the most underrated variable in any story of achievement. At 22, you often don't know what you want badly enough to pay the full price for it. At 42, you often do. And that shift in certainty has an enormous effect on output. There is also the matter of motivation. Research by Ari Kruger and others examining the relationship between age and entrepreneurial success found that the highest performing startup founders, measured by outcomes, not press coverage, tended to be in their mid-40s and early 50s. Not because they were smarter than their younger counterparts, but because they had developed what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the kind that doesn't depend on external validation or the fear of falling behind. They had stopped competing with an imaginary timeline and started competing only with the quality of the work itself. That is a cognitive advantage most 25-year-olds simply haven't had the years to develop. So what does this mean for you right now? It means your experience is not ballast. It is ballistic. It gives your next move more force than you realize. The career you pivoted from, the decade you spent learning something that didn't pan out, the hard years you are still standing on the other side of, none of it is subtracted from your potential. In the architecture of late success, it is all load-bearing. The people who succeed late are not built differently because they were born with something special. They are built differently because the path built them, slowly, often painfully, without a clear narrative until the moment the pieces connected. And the moment the pieces connect, that moment does not have an expiration date. You already know their names, even if you don't realize it. And one day, without knowing it, someone might know yours.